Hello dear students, today we start new model drama and comedy. Open your books at page 41, exercise 1. Read the definitions of drama, tragedy and comedy. Can you think of any popular tragedies or comedies? Let's read the definitions. Drama is literature that is written in order to be performed. Tragedy is a story ending unhappily with something terrible happening to the hero. Comedy is a funny story which usually has a happy ending. In exercise 2, you are to read the blurbs and decide whether these plays are comedies or tragedies. You are to give reasons. There are plays by William Shakespeare. Number 1 is As You Like It. Rosalind dressed up as a boy and escapes into the forest. There she meets Orlando. What will happen when Orlando finds out she is a girl?
I think As You Like It is a comedy because a woman dresses up as a boy and tries to trick people.
Hamlet. When his father dies, Hamlet's uncle Claudius becomes the king. The ghost of Hamlet's father tells him that Claudius murdered him. Will Hamlet take revenge?
I think Hamlet is a tragedy because it mentions death, murder, and revenge.
Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet like each other, but their families are enemies. Will they be together?
I think Romeo and Juliet is a tragedy because it is about two families which are enemies and how this affects their children's lives.
Now let's watch the video.
Drama and comedy. Think of your favorite movie or TV show. Is it a drama? Drama is literature that is written in order to be performed. Before cinema and TV shows, people would go to the theatre to be entertained. Two of the popular types of plays were tragedies and comedies. A tragedy is a story ending unhappily, with something terrible happening to the hero. A comedy is a funny story, which usually has a happy ending. One of the most famous playwrights is William Shakespeare. He wrote hilarious comedies and heartbreaking tragedies. As You Like It is a very funny comedy. Rosalind dresses up as a boy and escapes to the forest. There she meets Orlando. What will happen when Orlando finds out she is a girl? Hamlet is a sad tragedy. When his father dies, Hamlet's uncle Claudius becomes the king. The ghost of Hamlet's father tells him that Claudius murdered him. Will Hamlet take revenge? Romeo and Juliet is considered one of the great love stories. Romeo and Juliet like each other, but their families are enemies. Will they be together? Do you think Romeo and Juliet is a tragedy or a comedy? These plays are still performed all around the world. Which one would you like to see?
Kizhebek is a love story from Kazakhstan, similar to Romeo and Juliet.
Now let's open our books at page 42. Today we are going to get acquainted with Charles Dickens. What do you know about him? What are some of the books he wrote? Now you are to read the short biography to find out. Charles Dickens was an English writer born on the 7th of February 1812 in Portsmouth. He grew up in Kent until his father went to prison and young Dickens had to leave school and go to work. He worked in a shoe polish factory when he was only 12 years old. This experience inspired many of his novels about the terrible conditions of the English poor. Some of his best-known books are Little Dorrit, David Copperfield, and Oliver Twist. He died at the age of 58 on the 8th of June, 1870.
Charles Dickens was an English writer who grew up in Kent. He wrote Little Dorrit, David Copperfield, and Oliver Twist.
Oliver Twist is one of his famous novels. Exercise 2. You are to look at the picture. Who are the people in the picture? What do you think is happening?
The boy is Oliver Twist. The master is serving the soup, and Mr. Bumble is the man in the middle. They are in the workhouse. Oliver has asked for some more soup, and the men are angry. The boys are watching to see what happens.
Now, before reading the text, let's get acquainted with new words. Listen to them and write down in your vocabularies.
Appear. Can't believe my ears. Decide. Elbow. Lick. Master. Possible. Pot. Serve. Silence. Spoon. Ungrateful. Whisper. Workhouse.
Now let's read the text and watch the video.
Oliver Twist, Life in the Workhouse. Life in the workhouse was very hard and the boys were always hungry. The food was the same every day. A bowl of soup, which was mostly made of water, and on Sundays a small piece of bread. The boys became so hungry that one day they decided that someone must ask for more. They thought that if one boy got more soup, they could all get more. They chose Oliver. The master served the soup as usual, and the boys ate it quickly. "Go on then, go on," they whispered quietly and pushed Oliver with their elbows. Oliver was afraid, but he stood, picked up his bowl and walked slowly to the master. "Please, sir, I want some more." The master couldn't believe his ears. He looked at Oliver's pale, thin face and his empty bowl. "What?" "Please, sir, I'm hungry. I haven't had enough to eat. I want some more," said Oliver again. "Mr. Bumble," shouted the master angrily, and he hit Oliver on the head with his big soup spoon. All the boys waited to see what happened. Mr. Bumble appeared at the door. "What's the matter, master? Have the boys eaten?" "Oliver Twist wants more soup." Mr. Bumble's face went red and he looked very angry. "What? It's not possible. No one has ever asked for more. Oliver Twist, you are a bad, ungrateful boy."
Exercise 3. After reading the adapted excerpt from Oliver Twist, a novel about a poor orphan growing up in a workhouse, we are to answer the questions. What did the boys eat every day? The boys ate a bowl of soup every day. Why did they decide that someone must ask for more soup? They were so hungry. Who did Oliver ask if he can have some more? He asked the master. Why did Mr. Bumble come into the room? He came because the master called him. In exercise 4, we are to match the words expressions in the text to the words and expressions below. Let's find the words with the same meanings. Chose, picked. As usual, as always. Couldn't believe his ears, was very surprised. What's the matter? What's wrong? Ungrateful, unthankful. In exercise 5, you are to answer the question, why do you think Mr. Bumble was angry with Oliver? How do you think Oliver felt? What the master fear? Why or why not? You are to write few sentences. Listen to the model.
I think that Mr. Bumble was angry with Oliver because he asked for more food. I think Oliver felt very scared. I think that the master was not fair because he does not give the boys enough food and beats them when they complain.
Exercise 6. Let's speak about literary elements. Read the definitions. Script. The written text on a play or film. Plot. What happens in a story. Character. The people in the story. Setting. The time and place in which the story happens. Conflict. The disagreement or contradiction that creates the need for change in the story. Dialogue. A conversation between two or more people in a play, story, etc. Monologue. A long speech by one person in a play. And now let's answer the questions on the excerpt of Oliver Twist. Who are the main characters? Oliver Twist, Mr. Bumble, and the Master. Where does the excerpt take place? In a workhouse. What happens in the story? The master gives the boys their soup. They eat the soup. They choose Oliver to go and ask for more soup. Oliver asks for more soup. The master hits Oliver on the head and calls for Mr. Bumble. Which characters are in conflict? Oliver Twist is in conflict with the master and Mr. Bumble. Is there a monologue or a dialogue in the excerpt? A dialogue. In exercise 7, you are to list the main events of the excerpt. Use the list to give a short summary of it. Listen to the model.
Oliver Twist, Mr. Bumble, and the master are in a workhouse for boys. The master gives the boys their soup. They eat the soup. The boys are still hungry, and they choose Oliver to go and ask for more soup. Oliver asks for more soup. The master hits Oliver on the head and calls for Mr. Bumble. He comes in and is angry when he finds out what happened.
In exercise 9, you are to answer, what do you think happens next in the story? What do you think will happen to Oliver Twist? Listen to the model.
I think the master will tell Mr. Bumble to punish Oliver, and Mr. Bumble may beat Oliver or give him no food for some time.
In exercise 10, we shall listen and check if our answers were correct.
Mr. Bumble beat Oliver and locked him in a cellar for a week. Oliver was cold, unhappy, and hungry. Then he put him up for sale.
He picked up poor Oliver by his shirt collar and began to shake him and beat him with his big stick. Then he took him away and locked him in the cellar. Oliver was cold and frightened and cried all night. The next day, Mr. Bumble put a notice on the door of the workhouse, saying, "Do you want a boy to learn a useful job? We will give £5 to anyone who takes him away." For a week, Oliver stayed alone in the cold, dark cellar, and it was the worst week of his life. Poor Oliver cried all day, and at night he couldn't sleep because he was cold, unhappy, and hungry.
And your task is exercise 11. You are to give the story a different ending. Listen to the model.
Then all the boys stood up and stood next to Oliver. They were scared, but they wanted to help Oliver. "But sir, we are all hungry. We all want more." The master and Mr. Bumble
both looked at each other. They stepped to one side and whispered to each other. They were deciding what to do. We can't punish all of them, but we can't let the boys make the rules. Then the master turned around. Right. Just for today, you can all have another bowl of soup. Then, I don't want to hear any more from any of you. The boys couldn't believe it. They all lined up quickly with their bowls in their hands and got a second bowl of soup. They were happy, and they slept that night better than ever before.